Let me just start with giving you a small introduction about Siddharth. I mean, it's not a small one, but I'm going to just dive in. Okay, so Siddharth is a leadership coach, a community builder, a TEDx speaker, an eternal seeker. And what I mean by eternal seeker is he's the one who loves helping people become the people they want to be. And that's so beautiful. As a master coach at Ever Coach by Mind Valley, he has hosted a number of transformational experiences that has changed lives. As a leadership coach, he supports individuals, teams, and companies to find clarity for solving their most important challenges by tapping into their intuitive wisdom. He has also found Life Circles, which is a growing community of experiential learners who are passionate about building a meaningful life. Today, I want to actually continue my series about balancing life and health, which involves all the different aspects like physical, mental, social, and spiritual dimension. Today, I want to talk more about social health, which we can define as the ability to interact or communicate and form meaningful relationships with others. With you, Sid, I want to understand how we can mindfully and meaningfully communicate to bring in a balance in that social dimension of health. So, Sid, my first question to you is, to start with, what I want to understand is, what do you understand by communication? Is it just expressing my thoughts and feelings? Does that make a conversation complete, or is there more to it?
So, great question. I think everyone's given different definitions of communication over the years, but my favorite definition, Raksha, is actually in Stephen Covey's book. And he basically says, communication is really seeking to understand in order to be understood. Right. And then for me, that one line is the perfect way to really sums up all of communication for me in that one line, which is communication is really about you seeking to understand someone before you can be understood yourself. And it's a two-way street. One way reads you understanding, the other way reads being understood. And which is why for me, communication from that statement really comes down to two things, which is really mindful listening, which is the first part that helps you understand the other person. And then mindful speaking, which is the one that helps you be understood for who you are and what you need to communicate when it comes to expressing anything that you have in your mind. So I think this is really for me what communication is. And today more than ever, I think when we are split up in our own homes, completely caught up in virtual surroundings, far away from people we love, and still close to people we love, I think communication has taken on a new meaning of what does it really mean to understand someone who you're probably living with in the same house, and how to be understood as well for what you want and what you need in that particular situation. So I think all aspects of communication today we've been challenged to the next level when it comes to communicating everything that we have on our minds.
Right. And I so agree with you, I mean, it's a two-way street and it's about listening as well. And I think that's one of the things that we lack. And I beautifully remember one of the quotes that you've mentioned in one of your TEDx talks, as silence and listen both have the same alphabets. And I believe that, I mean, listening, it also comes from being silent. That's how you'll be able to listen to the other person without even coming from that aspect that I want to answer that person. It's just about understanding where he's coming from, he or she is coming from, rather than what you want to say next to the person once he's done with what he has to talk. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, absolutely, Raksha, I think that's one of my favorite reminders for myself, because as much as it's the fact that in any communication, listening is probably the most important. I call it actually a superpower that every person holds, but they don't realize they have. It's probably the simplest thing you can do in any conversation, any communication, which is to really, really listen. And then for me, being silent is the favorite way to really force yourself to push yourself in a place where you can really listen to not just what's being said in a communication, in a conversation, but also what's not being said. but being expressed. So there's so much that words, only so much that words can communicate in any particular situation, but there's so much more that body language and energy and everything else that comes with communication has to share with us. Right? And everyone knows, I think, it's less than 10% of what we communicate is through our words. 90% plus is through, our body language and through the tone of our voice. So if you can listen for that, and if you can stay silent enough to see and hear those things, you are able to put yourself in another person's shoes and feel not just empathy, but also compassion. And I think those are the two most important things that any person today in the world that we live in needs, in order to become not just a better person at work and everything else, but a better human being.
Beautifully said, Sid, that, empathy is so important in our daily communication as well with people. But, I fail to understand, I don't think everybody understands the difference between sympathy and empathy. And there's a very thin line between that. So can you just differentiate both for our viewers here?
Yeah, perfect. I think the best way for me to, explain this would be through an example. Sympathy is if someone has jumped into a well. Sympathy is you jumping into the well with them. Whereas empathy is you standing outside the well and helping the person really understand and know that this is basically how I know how it feels like in there when you're inside the well. But at the same time, I'm going to try my best to see what I can do to support you emotionally. It's not jumping into the well with them. Because once you jumped into the well with them, you're pretty much sympathizing. You're not really helping the person in any particular situation. Empathy is putting yourself in the other person's shoes and being able to look at things from their perspective and then coming back to your own shoes and providing your own perspective. When you're in the well with them, you can only see things through the same perspective that they're seeing because you're literally in the same situation. But empathy is about standing outside the well and being able to still give them your perspective once you understood theirs. So that's really what empathy is. And for me, compassion is the highest level of it, where you're standing outside the well and you're actively doing everything that is humanly possible for you to get the person out of the well. Not just feel what the person's feeling when they're inside the well, but to get them outside the well. And I think that's really the three levels: sympathy, empathy, and compassion, which is why compassion is probably the highest level of human service. And I think it's a very relevant conversation to have based on where we are in the world today. I think more of us need to put ourselves in shoes of where we can display highest levels of compassion. Everyone's going through their own thing, right, in different shapes and forms in the world today. Loved ones who have basically lost their lives, close friends who are affected by it, close friends and family members who are dealing with so much that's happening in their household and in their minds and brains every single day. How can you not sympathize, but how can you empathize as a starting point, and then go a level beyond and show your compassion towards this person so you can express your love and kindness through not just your words, but your energy and body language and all of that. So I think that's really where we are.
Right. No, and I completely agree with you that compassion stands the highest, and it's all about just being compassionate to every living being possible on this planet. And once we develop compassion, maybe it comes with gratitude, it comes with, I don't know what it can come with, but you would just evolve into a beautiful human being just with bringing in compassion in your life. So lovely. Sympathy, empathy, and compassion is something that we all need to have in our daily lives. So I remember, almost about, I think 27 years back, I did a workshop on communication. And it beautifully said something which has still stayed with me. It said that, once we start knowing a person, we start looking at them from a particular colored lens. And every time we communicate with them, we either build a new lens over the already existing one, or we strengthen the previous one that we've built. Now that probably is similar to judging the other person when we are communicating. I'm not sure if there's a difference or no. Maybe you can throw some light on that. But, I think communication would start with looking at that person with a fresh lens every single time we communicate. This sounds very easy. How do you really look at the same person as a stranger every time you communicate and still feel enthusiasm, love, care with whatever baggage we are carrying? How do you do that? How do you put it into practical practice?
Great question. And I think more people ask themselves this question, which is how can I look at someone I know from a different lens and communicate to them from that place? And I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that this process of really looking at someone you know from a different lens starts with listening. Again, coming back to what we said. What you're saying really is that when you know a person, you're only listening for the things and words and emotions that you already know they're going to convey to you. You're only listening for that. Everything else is not really coming into you, and you're not really processing it. But when you listen for something else that is beyond what you already know about them, you keep your eyes and ears open to getting surprised in any communication that you exchange with a person. And I think for me, the fundamental process of knowing a person you know and looking at them through fresh eyes comes through the fundamental concept of listening for the things that you're not aware, not listening to agree with this person, not listening to even disagree with this person, but listening for what this person has to say to you that is beyond what all your judgments and preconceived notions about this person. If you can listen at that level, that's the highest level of listening. It's like you sitting inside a dark room, right? If you don't allow yourself to open the windows and let the light in, you're never going to be able to see what lies beyond the room. When you're only listening for what this person already has always told you, you're sitting inside the dark room, right? But when you let the light in, now you're listening for things that are beyond what you knew already in that particular situation. Now, the highest level of listening requires you to step outside the room completely and look at the room from the outside, because now you're looking and listening from a place which is completely different. And that's where you get highest amount of surprises, and you also feel the highest amount of compassion and understanding for someone.
Right. And I remember doing, so by the way, Rashmi George, who I believe was one of your teachers at St. Xavier's, because when I sent her the creative, she said, "Oh, Sid looks like my student." So I was like, maybe because he is from.
Yeah,
right.
She is.
And so we've done this personal counseling course from St. Xavier's together, and that's how I know Rashmi. And of course, as a counselor, it's easy. And it comes with practice, of course. So we develop these qualities of showing respect, having genuineness, empathy, concreteness. We are congruent with who we believe we are. We are authentic as well. So all of this for either a counselor or a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, I think it comes with training. How do you generally train a common man to develop all of these values or all of these skills or attitudes in them?
So the first thing is that I would like to say that, first of all of these skills are inborn in us. I think that we train to get reminded about them. It's our true nature. It's not something that we need to learn from scratch. When we were a kid, we looked at every single thing with fresh eyes. Every new object was looked at by us from fresh eyes, right? It's as we grew up that we unlearned the things and we added all of these layers and filters, like you called it, right? So what we're really training to do is forget what we've learned over the years, that people have taught us, that society has taught us, that, everything that we've told to do. So we're not learning something new. We're unlearning what we already know so that we can become a kid again. And I think that's the big shift in our even in our minds. It's not about learning how to really be authentic. You already are. If you drop the things that other people and other words and other your environment around you has taught you. And the simplest way for you, any person doing this, to really go back to their authentic self and to really ask and understand it, is when you see anything. Let's say vanilla ice cream. I'm just taking that example because it's so hot here, and I would love some vanilla ice cream right now. But vanilla ice cream, right? What's the first thought that comes in your mind when you think vanilla ice cream, right? Just taking a first random example. Maybe it is the first thought that comes to my mind is, chocolate, hot chocolate with it. Now, if you go a level deeper and try to understand, why is it that hot chocolate is the first thought that comes to my mind when I think of vanilla chocolate, when I think of vanilla ice cream, you'll probably realize it's because every single time I've probably had this ice cream with my sister, I've probably had it with hot chocolate.
Right.
Right. So and then when you drill deeper and deeper, you realize that it's because every time you've done something, it's because something around you has always made you do it in a particular way. Did you actually always like vanilla ice cream with dark chocolate? Maybe not. But just because you did it so many times with the people you love, you think that's the way. So now asking yourself, how do I really like my ice cream? Is it really vanilla ice cream with dark chocolate or something else? Makes you understand what is you, your true authentic self. What does it truly, really, truly like? Taking away all the filters of what other people think you like or should have. So this is just a very simple example. Anything that you're thinking about, ask yourself, is this something that I truly, truly like? What's the first voice that comes into your head? Is the voice something that I truly feel is my voice? Or is it because growing up, my parents told me this is what I need to be doing? Or someone else around me, my friends did this all the time, or someone in my family did this all the time, so I'm doing it. If it's none of these and it's truly your authentic voice, you know you're being yourself in that particular situation. But the moment you hear someone else's voice telling you that this is what happened, you know that it's not you being authentically you.
Wow, this is so deep, Sid. Doesn't authenticity also come from just the feeling of being happy? Wouldn't that also mean that, we're listening to our authentic self, or we are being authentic as well because it's bringing us joy?
Raksha, I just want to take a question that's come from Jatin, which I think is super relevant to this. And I'll come back to your question as well. But I think Jatin basically says, how do you manage your conversations and emotions with things through the experiences that we're going through right now? And I think it's a very, very important question to address in the times that we live in right now. So with your permission, if it's okay, I'm going to just speak through that. And I'm going to share my personal experience. Right. I think the biggest thing that I've learned through this lockdown and the last lockdown is that our emotions are probably the single most important thing for us to understand, yet the most underrated thing that we've learned about. There should be an entire subject probably in school just about emotional management. And I don't know how we wouldn't taught this in school. But somehow we've all been taught to learn this through life. But the one thing I've learned about emotions is that emotions is really our energy in motion. Emotions is really our energy in motion, right? Which means that it always needs to move. It needs to flow. It needs to be expressed. And one of the most important ways for you to express it is, first of all, to yourself through practices like journaling, writing it down, through silent prayer, through meditation. All of these are ways for you to express your emotion, let the energy out from your body. But another really important way is communicating your emotions effectively to the people you love. And for me, there are a few simple ways you can do that. Most of us bottle up our emotions inside of us because we feel that's the way to control it, because we've always been taught that controlling our emotions is the most important thing. But if you listen to some of the people who are the most evolved, emotionally expressed people, including the Dalai Lama, right? He says awareness of your emotions is probably the single most important thing. It's not about controlling your emotions. It's about just being aware of what you're feeling at any given point. Which means that if you can, at any point when you're feeling something, be aware of what is it that you're feeling and be true and honest to yourself and label it for yourself. You have already you've already done so much more of the work than bottling it in within yourself. So being aware of exactly what you're feeling. If it is that you're feeling sadness right now, if it is that you're feeling happiness right now, if it is that you're feeling deep grief right now, being truthful and honest to yourself about what you're feeling is the single most important step to being more emotionally intelligent in the times that we're living in today. And the second step is now, from this place of personal awareness of your emotions, communicating it to the person you love, checking in, first of all, with them, saying, how are you feeling right now? What's really going on for you? What's your internal weather report? We all get up in the morning and see what the external weather is like. But asking someone, what's your internal weather report this morning, gives you a way for you to understand what their emotions are at this point. And then reciprocating that with saying, hey, I'm really feeling down and out today. Even if you can't put a label, at least feel it in your body and ask yourself what your body feels. And then communicate that. By doing just this one thing, which is allowing your emotions to get that energy to be in motion, by being truthful to yourself and the people you love, you already have given it a space for it to not hold any control over you anymore.
So true, Sid. And I remember there was a time when I wasn't very good at even understanding my emotions. There were two things that really helped me. One was my check-ins. So every hour I had an alarm, go off saying check-in. Because otherwise, even if I'm putting a mindly reminder, I might just not remember it, and once my phone rang, I'd be like, okay, let me just take a pause. Let me take a minute and understand what I'm feeling right now. And I would actually make like a flow chart, like a very beautiful designer flow chart, and just write down all my emotions. And at the end of the day, it would be such a colorful circle. So I was surprised to even understand that in a span of whatever number of hours, so 16 hours of my wake time, I could go through so many emotions. And the second thing that helped me was journaling. Journaling has done me wonders. And I'm not sure if you've read The Artist's Way book by Julia Cameron. It has those weekly, tasks, and she recommends us to write 3 pages. The first thing in the morning.
She calls it the morning pages.
Morning pages, right. And I think, and she beautifully says that 1.5 page, unless you're done with 1.5 page, the real story doesn't come out. So the first 1.5 pages is just something all superficially we're going to cover and, erase. But the last 1.5 pages is where actually you will come out with your true self and understand yourself better. So at least, checking in and journaling, as you said, rightly mentioned and answered Jatin's question. I think those are the 2 things that has helped me as well. So thank you.
No problem. And I think I just want to also just, as much as journaling 3 pages, 4 pages every day, and I love the morning pages routine. I think that most people right now, I think Brinda is also mentioning, is there's such a flood of emotions right now that just committing to 3 pages seems like another thing that you need to get done. Right. And that's the last thing you want to make your check-ins, because your check-ins are a quick way for you to reconnect with yourself. It's your safe space with yourself. It's your way to be honest with yourself. And your check-in can be as simple as a 1-minute ritual every morning once you wake up, where you just go take a pen and paper and just write down 2 sentences how you're feeling right now. Just doing this one thing continuously for the next 30 days is going to help you create an emotional calendar for yourself. It becomes a practice where you remind yourself how you're feeling and you're able to label what you're feeling consistently. And the more and more, just like you are lifting weights in the gym, right? And your muscles become stronger. Your emotional muscles also become stronger the moment you're able to check in, even just for 1 minute every single day. And that way you're able to sense what you're feeling way more quickly and become more and more aware of it. So it doesn't need 3 pages. It can just be 2 sentences. That's all I wanted to say.
Right. Beautifully said. I mean, I'm sure that will also work for everybody as long as they're able to check in with themselves and understand what they're feeling. True. So I wanted to, actually bring up this study that Harvard had done, and it's on relationships and communication skills. And they had done one of the longest possible studies, I think over a span of 75 years. Of course, there have been a few more studies come up, but they were not, they were short-term studies, of course. And they spoke about how your quality of life or your quality of your relationships with your loved one can enhance the quality of the life you live. And hence, building our social circles also becomes important, or even strengthening our relationships with our loved ones also becomes important. How do we first evaluate where our relationship stands. And then do you have a framework, that can help us strengthen our relationships or take our relationship to another level?
Absolutely. So I think there are lots of different frameworks, but the one simplest thing that you can do, which is that in a matter of the next 1 minute, are you able to put down 3 of the people who are closest to you? Simple exercise for everyone who's listening. In the matter of the next 1 minute, are you able to name 3 people who are closest to you? And if you're not able to name those people, that's a starting point for you to really go deeper into understanding who are those people that you really, really rely on, who you can depend on when you're having a bad day. Most people who cannot think of someone who is close to them, the single most important question I ask them is, when you're having a really terrible day, right? Or when you are going through something really, really painful, who's the first person you will call? That person is possibly the first person who's in your inner circle of people you will call as a friend, someone you can trust, someone who is, a supporter in your life. Making a list of 3 to 5 such people. I think too many people try to put too much pressure on themselves to have a list of 15 people, 20 people. You don't need that. You only need maximum 3 to 5 people who you can rely on when you're having a bad day. And the reason why this one metric is so important, which is, do you have someone to depend on when you're having a bad day, is because that's the single biggest indicator towards your own happiness, right? Knowing that someone has your back is the single biggest indicator towards your own happiness. So start off by listing the people who are closest to you. And then start off by evaluating how close you are to them on a few different levels. First is, how often do you communicate with them? So communication is a parameter. Second is, how much do you depend on them? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how often and how much can you depend on them? Third is, how honest and vulnerable can you be with them and express yourselves completely with them? And the last and the most important one is probably the fact that from all the possible people in your life, if you had to just pick one of them, right? If you had to just pick one of them, who would that be and why? Just knowing these different parameters just helps you, creates a scale for you to understand your relationships a level deeper. We have report cards for all other aspects of our lives, but when it comes to our relationships, we don't. And the point of report cards is not really to give marks, but it is to know who you can really trust and rely on and depend on in your life. And most importantly, which are those relationships that you really want to nourish and nurture? Unless you don't know that or don't have that list of 3 to 5 people, you're never going to actively spend the time to actually invest in them. And investing here means checking in with them, calling them, helping them out, supporting them, finding ways to make them win in the world, cheerleading them. All of these different things can only happen once you know who those 3 to 5 people are. Most people don't know that because they haven't taken the time to invest in understanding who they are and who those people are in their lives. So I think this is just a free, just a simple exercise. Start off listing it down and then evaluate them on those 3 to 4 parameters: vulnerability, communication, dependability, and trust. And once you've evaluated on these 4 parameters, now find ways and means that you want to do to improve this relationship even further.
So Sid, what you're saying is we need to consistently work on a relationship for it to not survive, but thrive.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's an ongoing process and we cannot just be like, done once and we are done with it and there's no effort needed later on. It has to be a continuous process and continuous effort, continuous filling of the cup, relationship cup that we need, rather than just emptying it every time.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite ways of describing what you're saying, which is investing in a relationship, is actually Shamal says, Shamal Vallabhji, who you know, Raksha, very well. And I think it was also in one of your previous talks, he says it beautifully that the best way to evaluate the quality of your relationship is to ask yourself, what are you giving to this relationship? And what are you getting from this relationship? What more do you need to give to this relationship? What more do you need to get from this relationship? Just these 4 questions. Most people expect so much from their relationship without asking themselves, what am I giving to it? Most people are willing to tolerate average relationships without asking themselves, what more do I want and what more can I give? But these four questions, which is, what am I giving to this relationship? What more can I give to this relationship? What am I getting from this relationship? What more can I get? Helps you not only judge where your relationship's at right now, but also increase its quality.
Beautifully said, Sid. So does giving and taking involve monetary gains and loss? Does it involve only emotional gains and loss? What does it really involve?
I mean, I think financial is the last thing in a relationship. I think the biggest investment is of your energy. And your energy is the single most, in my opinion, your single most important currency, valuable currency, is not your money. It's not your time. It's your personal energy. And in a relationship, you are investing your personal energy. And that is the single most important, valuable resource that you're investing for someone. So being able to invest that fully with all your heart is probably the most important thing that you can do for yourself and for this person. So I think financial money is probably the third on my list. Second is time. How much time are you giving? But the single most important thing is how much energy are you giving to this relationship?
How do you distinguish energy and time?
Energy is the invisible. Energy is the visceral. Energy is you might not be spent. You might just spend a minute, but the energy that you feel might be incredible. It might surge through your body. It has nothing to do with time, or it might be not involve a single ounce of money. But I call it the universal currency, right? It's the thing that you cannot see but feel, right? And I think energy really comes down to what you feel in your bones when you're with someone, right? And does it light you up? Does it bring the biggest smile on your face? Does it make you feel warm and fuzzy? Does it make you feel, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, I'm talking about a great conversation with a friend will make you feel warm and fuzzy. It helps you secrete the hormones in your body that make you feel good, right? Science has proven this. So that's what energy is all about. How do you really feel when you spend time with someone?
So does that relationship spark joy in your life? Is what we want
absolutely.
Is what we want to live for actually in that relationship. Cool. I remember, I lost my mentor almost about 5 years back. And that was the time when it got me thinking that, relationship is not about the duration or the time, the length of that relationship that we've spent together, but it's about the quality and just the connection that we've built over whatever number of years we were together. And it's so beautiful. I mean, until I had given that a thought, I don't think anybody realized that relationship is not about the length, the time spent. I mean, not the time spent, but the length of togetherness. Like in a marriage, you're married for probably 27 years, 30 years, and you're still not connected beautifully with that spouse of yours. So it's not about just the length of the time spent together in a relationship. It's about the connection that we build, and it's so beautifully said, Sid. Thank you. Coming to vulnerability, I believe being vulnerable is one of the very important skills in building a good relationship. But for a lot of us, we find it easier to give advices to our loved ones who come to us and share their experiences or issues with us. Rather than sharing our own experiences about a similar situation and being vulnerable about what we experienced and then sharing about how we sailed through it, it's just so much easier to just give advice that this is what you need to do and this is how it'll help you. Now, sometimes there are people who just want to be heard. They don't really care for advices at that particular point of time, and that's when the listening skills also come in. But what I want to understand is, how do we differentiate, as in when should we just listen? Should we now, enter in and share our experiences as well? How do you act mindfully on it?
So I want to go back to your thought around vulnerability. And I think vulnerability most people feel is the act of, really expressing yourself fully which it is. But one of the most important things that vulnerability is that vulnerability is risky, right? The reason why most people avoid being vulnerable is because it involves them taking a risk of not knowing what's going to happen when they share a certain aspect of themselves with someone else. And it's that uncertainty that stops most people from being vulnerable, because they have no idea that by taking that risk, is it actually what's going to happen? When you share a part of you vulnerably in any conversation, you always stand that risk. But the ones who are able to be most vulnerable are the ones who are able to take that risk anyway, because they know what's going to emerge out of it is going to actually strengthen your overall relationship for the better. Right? And if it does not strengthen that relationship for the better, then maybe that relationship is not a one that's worth having for you. So people who consistently are vulnerable are the ones who take that risk, because they know that they're putting their relationship on the line every time they're being vulnerable, because they know what they get out of doing that is going to be so worth it. Right? And what vulnerability really means is expressing every single aspect of yourself without holding back and taking that risk without expecting a reward. That's really what vulnerability is. And so when it comes to knowing what's the fine line of when can you be vulnerable, every time is a good time to be vulnerable. I think there is no, the fact that, if we even think, okay, this is a good time, is already you overthinking. A kid, think of a kid. Again, I'm going back to the kid example, right? The kid is vulnerable all the time. They're expressing every single emotion they feel without holding back. They're vulnerable all the time. They don't think, okay, is it a good time to be vulnerable? But as we grow up, we've learned that there is only times when you can communicate X and Y. And then we hold on to that because we know there's a certain amount of risk involved, right? Which is what it really means, that when you are in any conversation, if you feel that this relationship really matters to you, the first thing you want to do is to put a part of you in that relationship by truly expressing yourself and being vulnerable. And true vulnerability actually, again, comes only through powerful listening. Again, going back to the very first statement I think I started this conversation with, which is true vulnerability can only come when you seek to understand the other person before wanting to be understood. And the only way you can seek to understand the other person is by listening. So I think at the base of everything comes listening, powerful listening.
Right. And I believe that vulnerability also comes with authenticity. Only once you start knowing yourself better is what you express will also synchronize and be congruent with what you're thinking. Right. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, vulnerable. And of course, who doesn't like being authentic? Who wants to put a mask on the face and just not be your authentic self and be known as your unauthentic self? Yeah. So yeah, beautiful. I mean, why not just be vulnerable? And as you said, vulnerability involves taking risks. Just dive in like a kid. And, if you value that relationship, just dive in as a kid. So when you said, if you're not very sure about that relationship, or if you're not sure whether you want to be vulnerable, maybe it's a toxic relationship as well. So how do you really know that, this is a toxic relationship and whether this is the right time to enter in, to leave, or can we still grow in a toxic relationship? I mean, how does this work? Because we've seen, even nowadays, we see a lot of divorces happening after spending a good amount of years together. So I'm not sure whether it's about the toxic relationships or is it stopping them from growing? What is it? I mean,
I saw the news of Bill and Melinda Gates. Bill and Melinda Gates are divorcing yesterday, and the reason they cited is that they couldn't grow together as a couple. That the growth they wanted as individuals, they couldn't do that. But I think it's unfair to assume that every divorce really happens because of a toxic relationship. Often it's, divorces happen for very, very different reasons. But I feel like, coming back to your question about how do you really evaluate if a relationship is toxic, it goes back to the same 4 questions that I shared earlier, which is what Shamal really calls the equality equation in a relationship. That every relationship needs to be equal for it to thrive. right? A sign of a toxic relationship, if there is where there is an imbalance. And the way you judge that imbalance is again through the same four questions. What am I giving to this relationship? What am I getting from this relationship? What more do I want to give? What more do I want to get? Right? Now, if there is an imbalance between what you're giving and what you're getting, that's the first sign. If there's an imbalance between what more you want and what more you can give, again, there's a second sign. Now, these are signs. Does not mean it cannot change and you cannot work on it. Right? You can work on it. You can continue to have an honest, vulnerable conversation with this person, saying this is what I feel is the current status of this relationship and this is how I want to improve it. And take the first steps to improve it from your end and see if there is a reciprocation. Now, if honestly, after all your honest expression and reciprocation, there is no return, that's when you really need to take a decision of whether that toxic relationship is that relationship is really serving you or not.
Right. So there's too much of introspection that needs to be done before we even decide whether it's a toxic relationship or no. And I think there's one, and I'm sure in every relationship, whether it's about toxic relationship or no, there are chances of growing. But of course, everybody has an individual understanding of their growth and what kind of stops them from growing. And that's probably one of the reasons also that you could decide to either enter in, stay, leave a relationship. I mean, it's completely, of course, an individual choice. And, you know, my son beautifully puts this. There is nothing right or wrong. There are no mistakes that you make. Whatever you decide, you just have to deal with the consequences that come with it.
Absolutely.
And you know, for a 16-year-old, I remember this when he said, when he mentioned that when he was 16, and I found him too profound. It's such a profound thought. And it actually made me think as well that, you know, yes, what you're saying makes sense. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. There are no mistakes. Why punish anybody? Why hold back yourself? Why hold back your authentic self also in expression? And it's just about you dealing with your consequences with what you throw, you know, in a relationship. Beautiful. I think, you know, when when I attended the 21-day program of yours and Shyama's, I remember talking about Esther Perel, who is a well-known psychologist in New York. And she had this one beautiful line mentioned that once what the whole village provided us, we now only seek in one relationship. And that adds a lot of pressure to that one relationship. You know, from that one relationship, we expect our partner to be our, you know, companion, our mentor, our guide, our bitching partner, our spiritual connect, everything. And that just adds too much pressure on that one relationship. And that could probably, instead of strengthening it, it could probably weaken our relationship as well. But during this current scenario, when it's difficult to really, you know, connect with people, how do you think we should widen our social circle in a way that we are able to build different relationships and suffice, give and take different things from each relationship rather than focusing only on that one relationship for everything?
No, absolutely. I think understanding what you said, you put it beautifully. I think every relationship serves a certain amount of, at a certain value in your life, and understanding what you hold a relationship, what value a particular relationship holds in your life, what it contributes to your life is very important, so that you're not looking at the same relationship serving all your needs in any particular thing. But I think in today's times, I honestly, I feel like I don't think it's about widening your social circle. I think the time that we are in right now is less about widening your social circle, but deepening your existing relationships. Because I feel that now more than ever is a chance for you to get to know the people who truly matter to you, and for you to express all of yourself and to allow them and to create space for them to express all of themselves to you. And this not only means your spouse, your partner, your son, your daughter, but also, like Jatin's mentioning in the comments, also your staff, your teams, right? The people you work with. You're seeing them pretty much every single day online. How can you create a space where you're not just speaking, where you're checking in with them, not just about work, but about their life? Because everyone's going through so much. So I feel it's not just about widening your social circles anymore. I personally think now the time is right for us to deepen our existing relationships, our existing circles, and asking ourselves, why does this person really matter in my life? And how can I do something to reciprocate and support this person?
Right. Beautifully said, actually, Shamal. Yeah, what you're saying makes sense. Instead of looking for more, building new circles, I think deepening and strengthening our existing ones makes more sense, especially during this crucial time. And I believe,
Exactly.
everybody is to some or the other sort of stress. And I also think stress kind of affects communication and how
Mm-hmm.
beautifully and openly you can communicate. So do you think that stress really affects our communication, and if it does, how do you avoid that?
Of course, I mean, stress is like it hijacks our brain, right? And when our brain is hijacked, we're not thinking straight. And when we're not thinking straight, you're not being present in a relationship. So 100% stress affects everything. And I think the most important process of overcoming stress is this process of check-in again. Before you start any conversation, most people's minds are what happened before they started the conversation or what's going to happen after they leave the conversation. Their minds are in the past or in the future. A check-in is really the process of getting really present with them in the now and helping them enter the conversation smoothly from a place of um, being completely present. And one of my favorite ways to check in with someone to ensure that they're able to express their stress that's also on their mind at the same time, create space to be really present is what I call a sweet and sour check-in. What's sweet in your life right now, and what's sour? What that does is it creates an open space for both of you to put everything on the table that's really going on for you right now, instead of thinking about it before you dive deep into whatever conversation you want to have. And this includes a professional conversation. Every week, I have a call with my team, and we start with a sweet and sour check-in, where my team primarily is a remote team, so we work from 9 or 10 different countries, and all of us basically put on the table what's sweet for us from this past week, what's sour from us from this past week. Just doing that one thing creates space for all of us to express all of ourselves and takes away a little bit of the stress that's been playing on our minds, because now you've gotten it out. Again,
Right.
energy is your emotions is energy in motion. The moment you get it out, you've already created space for you to flow back.
Right. I remember doing this one program or a workshop about what's the first aid kit for your emotions? Because when they come in and you don't know what to do it before you kind of barge, out your emotions and damage your relationships, there were some few techniques that they had, taught us about, and they were like a first aid kit that we were given, and beautiful. I mean, just about before you can kind of you gain your sanity back, you just want to do those things, and once you gain your sanity back, you just want to go and reflect back as to what went wrong, and then do what's
Mm-hmm.
needful.
Mm-hmm.
So one more thing, since we're dealing with this pandemic, and it's a really bad time that we all are going through, and we grieve only because we love, yeah. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us are facing grief in one form or the another. Either they're losing hope, either they've lost a loved one, or they're losing money, losing career, or even belief in oneself. So, and communication could be difficult during these grieving moments because there are two people involved in a communication, one who's grieving and one who's listening to the grieved one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you really communicate in this crucial time? Of course, listening is the key, but how do you kind of bring in a communication which can I mean, not which can help you grieve better? Maybe if I've put it right.
I think grief is one of those things that the only thing that it can heal grief is time. Right. And I think the most important thing that any person who's grieving, you need to offer that person is the time and space to really get back to being who they were. Right. And what you can do is really create meaningful silences for them to express whatever's on their mind, and to really listen through it. I think most of us try to help a person even when they're trying to grieve, by trying to, change their mood, right? And make them feel differently. Um, that's probably not very helpful, because grief is one of those deep rooted emotions that takes its own time for it to take over your entire body, and it has its own cycle. Grief has its own cycle where you first get really, you deny everything that's happened. Then you get really angry about what happened. Then you try to bargain, saying, I wish this, at least this could have happened. Yeah, I wish this could have happened differently. Then you go into a state of real depression, down, where you've kind of, it's hit you that this has actually happened. And only after you go through these 4 stages do you actually reach a stage of acceptance. And then once you've accepted it is when you go move on, and then you grow through it, right? So giving any person the time to go through all of these different stages without trying to hurry them through it is probably the most important thing you can do for this person. You are like literally the silent supporter who's holding this person's hand, if not physically, but even emotionally, as they go through these different stages. It's probably the most important thing that you can do when it comes to grief. And I think the people who've experienced massive amount of grief and who've still grown through it are the ones who look back at what they're grieving and find meaning in it, not happiness. The most important thing that you can do when it comes to grief is not try to make this person happy, but help them find meaning in it, in whatever way you can. And this is scientifically backed, high amount of research, and even there's a term for it. It's called tragic optimism. People studied the survivors of the Holocaust. People studied the survivors of the World Trade Center casualty. People studied the people who've gone through massive amount of grief. And they realized that a certain amount of people broke down, but there were others who grew. And the ones who grew were the ones who looked back and asked themselves, how did I grow through this situation? What is the meaning I can draw from it? How did it change my own understanding of myself, my understanding of my family and loved ones, and the perspectives that I have about life? In fact, this whole term of tragic optimism was given by this guy named Viktor Frankl, who's a legendary Holocaust survivor. He wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning, which I highly recommend a lot of people to read. Super relevant for where we are right now.
True. I've read his book and it's so relevant. I agree. And it's so deep. I mean, I think once you read the book, you'll understand what we both are trying to really say about this. There's one repetitive question that's been coming in. About, is it right to be selfish in a relationship?
Interesting. I mean, I think I think there's never black and white answers to questions like this. It always needs context. So the question, I think the person who asked this question, Mukesh, my question to you would be, what does selfish really mean to you? What does being selfish really mean to you? And have you run your relationship through the 4 questions that I shared earlier? Because if you've run yourself through those 4 questions, and at the end of it, you've realized that what you're giving to this relationship is much more than what you're getting back in return, then it's time for you to honor yourself first, because a relationship always involves 2 people. And if you're not honoring yourself, the relationship is never bound to thrive. So if selfish to you means putting your needs in the relationship and honoring them, then yes, 100% you should be selfish. But if selfish means expecting the other person to fulfill all of your expectations in the relationship, then no, you shouldn't be selfish. So it all comes down to what being selfish really means and what's the context of your question.
True. I hope that answers Mukesh's question. I think Jatin has asked something with regards to what you had answered earlier, that, being vulnerable could backfire because we don't really know what's the outcome. How do we gain that trust back to, be okay to be vulnerable again? How do we start trusting ourselves back, actually, to start being vulnerable again?
I mean, it's a process. Again, there is no I wish I could give you one step, two step, three to something like this, but it's really a process of um, going back to your human nature, which is your human nature is to trust. The human nature is to belong and to be with people you love and to be in communities and express your love. And it is about tapping back into who you innately are and taking the risk one more time, trusting once again, and seeing where that leads you. So I think that's just the honest answer. There's no this thing, time and taking that risk. And I think Meenal is asking the question, yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. That's the name of the book. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. Cool. So I would love to know more about your life circles before we really end this session.
So Life Circle is something I started as. Thank you, Raksha. So Life Circle is really a community of people who I started curating just to. I felt like too many people today are living lives on their own, and are wanting to grow but don't really have spaces and experiences to grow through. I'm a huge believer that it's experiences that change our lives and help us grow, not information. True transformation for me happens through experiences. And Life Circuits was really a way for me to curate a community of people who have these experiences together, who grow together. And I think it's been a community that I've been curating for the last year and a half. Now we used to do physical retreats, but then we started doing virtual retreats. And now what we're doing more and more is we're trying to create a school called Grow with Soul, which you were part of, where we're taking the community experiences that we did at Life Circles and making it available online through an online community called Grow with Soul. So if you are someone who's listening, and if this would be valuable for you, if you're looking for some sort of growth in any aspect of your life, if you're looking to push yourself out of your comfort zone, if you're looking to find a group of people who are trying to do the same, I request you to check out Grow with Soul, the page, and yeah, you'll be able to join us for experiences.
I highly recommend that as well. I've grown beautifully in your 21-day journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Raksha. Thank you.
What do you recommend our reviewers should start with?
I mean, in what context?
In the conversation and building your relationships and getting your communication to another level. What do you recommend our viewers start with?
Again, the thing that is most important, which I think is the base and foundation of everything, which is simply listen. Stay silent for 5 seconds longer in a conversation. See where it takes you. And my favorite way to do this is pinch yourself. If you want to talk and say something in a conversation, just pinch yourself to remind you that you need to stay silent. And that doing that one thing will transform the nature of your relationships and the nature of your communication.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sid. Anything else that you want to share with us that I've missed on and you think that's important too as well?
No, Araksha, I think this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for making this available to everyone. And thank you to everyone who joined, who watched, who contributed, who shared your insights and your questions. Means a ton. And wishing all of you health and stay safe and check in with your family.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raksha. Cheers. Bye.